Reconsidering the Metaverse, Spaces, Screens, and the In-Between. I'm speaking to you from the University of Idaho and the College of Art and Architecture. I'm Assistant Professor Dave Gottwald. I teach interaction design for mobile devices and experiential design for the built environment. My colleague is Associate Professor Greg Turner-Rahman. He'll be speaking with us during the second portion. We are writing partners on several projects, including a 3-volume edited collection and a monograph. Virtual Interiorities links practitioners and theorists of film, game studies, architecture, themed environments, and related design disciplines. Theme Parks, Video Games, and Evolving Notions of Space charts a freshly interwoven history of animation, film, theming, game spaces, and virtual reality. So we're interested in connections between the histories of animation, film, theme parks, and video games, which led us naturally to VR. All right, here comes the metaverse. Here it comes. But what if we're not defining it right? Much commentary on Meta, formerly Facebook's, virtual initiatives has been predictably negative. Meta overestimates the power of VR in its current form, as does anyone criticizing Meta for not being immersive enough. At the heart of these critiques is the graphical fidelity of the representation. And also the interface. So this Fast Company article asks, why a headset? The popular perception is that these kinds of virtual experiences will be inside a headset. Popular culture sustains this notion, right? So in Ready Player One, people spend all their time in a shared headset environment called the Oasis. The term metaverse was coined by Neal Stephenson in his 1992 novel Snow Crash. His conception, too, was a headset-based communal type of virtual internet. The irony is that in the book, Stephenson describes a class structure based on the fidelity of one's virtual self. So in the world of Snow Crash, Zuckerberg's sim-like avatar wouldn't have a shot at making friends or finding a job, and forget about landing a date. A more compelling literary reference for what's to come in virtuality is Ray Bradbury's 1953 novel, Fahrenheit 451. In the book, the protagonist's wife is addicted to the virtual friends and family that she watches on TV. There is a common room in the house with full-color, wall-to-wall immersive imagery. Bradbury calls this room the TV parlor. It is an environment as real as the world, he writes. It becomes and is the truth. This concept reappeared on Star Trek in the 1980s. You may have seen this, a single room of immersive virtual imagery called the holodeck. So again, we ask, is the VR headset the right way to be thinking about the metaverse? John Carmack, Oculus VR mastermind, made a curious observation in his 2021 Facebook Connect keynote. I've made the pitch before that perhaps a sufficient argument for VR is just to say it's screens and people as the primary thing. This presentation describes such a digital reality model. We're interested in how large format responsive displays will work in homes and offices in the near future. We foresee further display liminality, translucency, hybridity, and augmentation. Basically spaces, screens, and the in-between. A screen-based metaverse, not a headset one. So let's look at some origins here. In Theme Parks, Video Games, and Evolving Notions of Space, we describe a progression of spatial regimes. Beginning in the 1920s, 4 of these have evolved beyond traditional architecture. These regimes contextualize and explain how we have arrived at virtual reality. Dominique Arsenault is a Canadian film professor, and he's published with Pierre-Marc Coté, a Canadian game studies researcher. Now, in 2013, they used the term graphical regime to define the qualitative aspects of a video game experience, circumscribing both the imaging of gameplay and gameplay of the image. They argue that the game itself is inseparable from its graphical representation. We've adapted and applied this concept to environments. After them, our spatial regime describes the spatialization of experience and the experience of spatialization. So the architectonic regime. We consider all traditional architecture as a single spatial regime and set it aside for this discussion. Beginning with the introduction of cinema, there have been 4 additional spatial regimes. These regimes are a shared post-cinema humanity, essentially our evolving relationship with the image. First, we have the filmic regime. So with the introduction of the motion picture camera, things begin to change. Cinema began to envelop our spaces, a kind of what Greg and I call cinematic subsumption. There were 3 factors which pushed sets to become more like the built environment. First, you had film stock advances, so greater clarity in the image. You had better lensing, so there was greater depth of field. But most importantly, you had advances in camera motion. So cranes and booms took the camera into film sets. Whole environments had to be constructed which could actually be inhabited by actors. This is crucial because it is the origin of the game engine, a moving point of view within spaces. Sets must now be designed specifically to allow for the camera to penetrate these spaces. Spanish art historian Ramirez provides 6 properties that make film sets distinct from architecture. He says they're fragmentary, they have altered scale and proportions, they're rarely orthogonal, they're hyperbolic, they're mobile, flexible, elastic, and of course temporary. Architects began working in the movie industry, and movie people began working as architects. Southern California became a mix of fantastic building styles, all rooted in movie fantasies. So the language of film sets began to creep into the built environment, okay? So the altered scale and proportions, some of these whimsical structures look like they were about to collapse. Hyperbolic, new movie palaces were particularly over the top. And that brings us to the thematic regime. It was at Walt Disney's iconic park in Anaheim, California, where the thematic regime began in 1955. Although based on earlier forms, Disneyland is a sui generis contemporary theme park model. The theme park lets the public actually visit and explore the image, much like performers inhabit film sets. Beginning with Disney, theme spaces were storyboarded as films. It is this sequential visual narrative which sets the thematic regime apart from the filmic. Like architecture, theme park structures are permanent and fixed, and bringing the language of set design and storyboarding with them. So altered scale and proportions, you see forced perspective in these parks. Hyperbolic, right? So look at Walt Disney's childhood and then the Disneyland version of that small town. Fragmentary, so only what is seen by the public is built. And rarely orthogonal, so buildings can be as playful as cartoons. Now we arrive at the electronic regime. Beginning with Doom, the first-person shooter genre took gaming environments to new levels of immersion. This was the first title we could say was developed with software we would call a game engine. And that engine was developed by John Carmack. In Doom, the player's point of view is essentially a movie camera. The spatial regime of electronic games requires 3 elements. So structure, right? The computer code, like engineering plans, provides organizational parameters. Then you have presentation, so environments and characters are presented to the player via a level of graphic fidelity. And most importantly, functionality. So functionality makes game spaces distinct from other constructed environments. The rules embedded in the game are enmeshed in a series of spaces. And this brings us to what Greg and I call the GoldenEye moment, when the filmic and thematic regimes came crashing into the electronic. So the 5th generation video game console was Nintendo 64 in 1996. A year later, you had the title GoldenEye 007, based on the James Bond film from 2 years prior. For the first time, a game became more popular than its parent film. GoldenEye 007 merged film viewer and game player in a new form. The developers were able to visit the standing sets and document the spaces, using even construction blueprints to design the game levels. Here was a pivotal intersection. So players could act out the film while still proceeding through levels with obstacles and goals. Like theme spaces, video game spaces are hyperbolic and disproportional, yet they also provide virtual avenues for the language of set design. So they're temporary. When a game is not turned on, the spaces don't exist. Mobile, flexible, and elastic, so game spaces span a multi-dimensional array of levels to facilitate whatever play requires. And they're fragmentary. So though an entire plan is stored within the software, spaces are rendered based only on the needs of the player at any given time. Now we arrive at the holistic regime. So by the early 2000s, game engines became detached from particular titles, effectively opening the toolbox to other developers. Today, there are 2 leading open engines. You may have heard of these, Unreal and Unity. Within an engine, game developers play, inhabit, design, and iterate simultaneously. The game engine is at once architectonic, filmic, thematic, and electronic. It is the culmination of all the prior spatial regimes. When we talk to designers who are not game developers, I say imagine a house being built. But the architects are inside the house, and it is being designed and constructed. They can make any change they want, iterate and test endlessly while they still live in the house. Testing requires that the designer be in the space, inspecting how each change alters gameplay. The game engine is a tool for environmental development and the resultant environment itself. So the game engine, as Greg and I like to say, is both the dreamer and the dream. So stagecraft, approaching a screen-based metaverse. Most recently, the game engine has dramatically changed how movies are shot. We've come full circle back to sets, actually. In the last 3 years or so, a new technology developed by ILM in partnership with Epic Games has been maturing. It's called Stagecraft. This technology debuted with the Mandalorian series. Stagecraft combines massive LED walls and the Unreal game engine on an actual soundstage. ILM calls their virtual stages volumes. These volumes have both practical and virtual elements. 4 servers provide 3 4K images seamlessly on the LED walls and 1 4K image on the ceiling. So here's the blank LED wall, and that's when they turn on the rendering. Small motion tracking cameras constantly transmit the position of the shooting camera. The projection on the LED walls tracks directly with the movement of the camera. Thus, the virtual and physical camera have become one and the same. The volume is a circle, and all shots are carefully staged within it. This allows for complete coverage of the actor's peripheral vision, just like a natural horizon. The key to Stagecraft's holism is in how seamless the projected world and the physical world blend. Here you can see the LED wall and the practical set. And rather than moving the camera and the actors, you can move the background around both. Image and lighting changes are made to the volume set in real time. The dreamer and the dream. Stagecraft embodies all 6 properties of set design in a mixed reality construct. It's fragmentary, there's altered scale and proportions, it's rarely orthogonal, it's a circle, it's hyperbolic, mobile, flexible, elastic, make changes on the fly, and of course temporary, turn it off and it's gone.
Reconsidering the metaverse. Stagecraft-like screen environments will continue to proliferate, and there are precedents. One of the largest such installations opened at Los Angeles International Airport in 2013. The clarity and size of the displays still captivate and immerse viewers today. In 2022, display technology enveloped an entire Olympic stadium at the Winter Games. The micro LED panels are flexible enough to be fitted to multiple curved surfaces. Like in this new Mercedes-Benz, gauges and dials have given way to wraparound informational screens. Displays are enveloping us everywhere. This cruise ship has virtual balconies that project a live feed taken from a camera elsewhere. Display replaces architecture. Image replaces space. This also happens now in themed environments. Disney's Galactic Star Cruiser Hotel has windows showing fictional environments with data overlays to further enhance the storytelling. For the home, manufacturers are preparing even larger, ultra high-definition televisions. The price point of these will continue to fall. What is happening is that spaces and screens are merging, just like John Carmack suggests. Everyone will own an impressionist masterpiece with the fidelity to see brushstrokes. We already have this technology, but it's quite expensive for the home. In commercial settings, large-scale displays are often used as virtual backdrops. Companies such as Lightfield Labs are developing a new generation of displays. This includes a quasi-holographic imagery. Other digital billboards seemingly thrust images into the urban environment, yet the illusion only works from one point of view. Interior ultra-high-definition displays will serve many purposes, such as virtual windows. Imagine standing in a room full of displays, just like Bradbury's TV parlor. The companies like Roomality are exploring this technology. Roomality uses sensors to adjust displays according to your movement, creating parallax and depth. The distinction between a physical window and a virtual one is moot. Like Stagecraft, the virtual camera merges with the physical world. In this case, you. As in Fahrenheit 451 and Star Trek, this might be a dedicated room, plain and empty at first, but once activated, a virtual window displays a world that tracks with the viewer. Depending on the displays, these could be quite immersive representations. Information could be spatialized and even ambient. This bookcase could hold any kind of media. All would be links to other resources. Walls could be used as virtual whiteboards and further informational displays. Microsoft's Illumaroom used projections to map game environments into the living space. These metaverse rooms could provide richer and higher definition representations. Voice and touch will increasingly replace peripherals. Microsoft's Project Milo did just this with virtual characters. Files and folders could be adjustable in metaverse space with walls that replace the desktop. Screen-based metaverse environments will serve multiple roles, from lighting and atmosphere to location, spatial reference, even the weather. A screen-based metaverse will be like your own personal stagecraft. It will also provide vivid interactions with other people. Google's Project Starline combines 3D scanning and displays to create compelling, lifelike representations within video chat. A metaverse chat will take on a spatial quality as well. Viewers will speak within a shared environment. Like stagecraft, imagery is composited in real time. The viewer will experience parallax and movement towards and into the image. Ultimately, interior spaces will become portals and expressive visual tools. In our model, headset-based VR remains a specialized tool, a valuable yet niche experience. The real power of the metaverse will be all around us in a world of responsive screens as spaces. Now for some parting thoughts. We see a metaverse of complete augmentation, space as image and image as dynamic content. As John Carmack said, maybe the metaverse is just a lot of screens, lots of people, a screen-focused world. During the filmic regime, we began to see stage as architecture and architecture as stage. As a result, in the thematic regime, we arrive at image-based built environments. In the electronic regime, the viewer as player becomes embedded in these images as virtual space. Stagecraft ushers in the holistic regime as game images are reconstructed in physical space. A screen-based metaverse will encompass not only virtual and augmented reality, it will span across all our devices and spaces. Much more than a headset, this metaverse will be spaces, screens, and the in-between. A willed environment of valuable information and immersive experiences, subtle yet sublime. Thank you.